Welcome to BSAC's Financial Aid and Managing College Costs presentation. Today, this presentation is going to talk about how to pay for college, costs of college, financial aid, and ways to alleviate, maybe even reduce the costs of college. Some people have a lot of anxiety about paying for college, so hopefully we can minimize some of that anxiety with this presentation. One thing to be thinking about as you are planning to pay for college is how are you going to plan ahead? One of the things that's really important is to do your research about college costs, about what you might expect to pay. There are some tools, we're going to go over those in a minute, that can help you figure out what college might cost for you and your family, not just the advertised college costs. The other thing that's really helpful to do is to make sure that your expectations are aligned. What you don't want to do is have a student who expects his parents to pay for the full cost of college and then have parents who expect the student to pay for the college. So it's a good idea to have those conversations early, as often as seems necessary, so that you can be on the same page. It can sometimes be a difficult conversation to have. It can be difficult for people to talk about money in general. It could mean that you have to talk about making difficult decisions about where to apply and where to attend. But if you talk about it early and have those conversations, it can help as you move through the process and as you have to make decisions. So let's talk about what does college actually cost. If you look at the chart here, you can see that the most expensive college out there costs about $70,000 a year. If you multiply that over 4 years, you get $280,000, assuming the cost does not go up every year, which it typically does. You could look at the University of Vermont, it's about $35,000. Vermont State Colleges are just over $24,000. Community College of Vermont is about $14,000. And then we've listed on here a Vermont Trade School as well, so you can get an idea of other types of education. That's about $25,000. Now, this is the advertised cost for each of these schools. The advertised cost is what they put on their website, what they put in their literature. It's what they say college costs for a student to attend. Now, these costs include all of the costs associated with attending that institution. It's tuition, which is the cost just to go there. It's room and board, which is housing and meals. It does include travel, personal expenses, things like books and supplies as well. So the advertised costs, you got that there. However, what you want to think about is not necessarily that posted advertised cost, but what you're going to pay, or the net price. The net price is the cost of attendance minus any gift aid you receive. That's what you have to come up with. Now again, the cost of attendance includes all costs, including things you have to pay for out of pocket, like books and personal expenses. But when you subtract gift aid and you subtract gift aid, which is grants and scholarships, that's the money that you're actually going to have to come up with to pay. Now, grants and scholarships are free money. It's money that you don't have to pay back, that you might get from a school, you might get from an outside funding source. You take that away, your net price is what you really need to be thinking about. A lot of people think about, oh, the cost of college is so expensive, but really it's that net price that you need to be thinking about. So let's give you an idea of what the net price actually is. This chart lists some average net costs for the same schools that we looked at in the first chart. So that school that costs $70,000. As an example, the average student, first-year student coming into that school, is going to pay $34,000. So that's a significant difference. You can see the rest of them as well. UVM, it's about $19,000. The Vermont State College is $15,000. And then you can go down the list. CCV is about $11,000. Now, what that means is that of all of the students going into that school in their first year, on average, this is what they're paying. That is their net costs. Now, it should be noted that some students potentially are going to pay full price and some are going to pay significantly less than full price. That's where you get that average. The key thing to note is that most students, most families are not paying the full price. They are paying less. How can you find out what the net price might be? This source, the College Scorecard, is a good way to find out about the cost of college. The way this works, you go to collegescorecard.ed.gov, you type in the school you're looking for, and it can give you a whole bunch of information, one of which is about costs. What it can give you is a sense of the net price. So they break it down a little bit. So say your income is between $0 and $30,000 a year, or between $30,000 and $48,000, and so on. They'll give you an estimate of what the net price is for a family whose income falls in that range. So you can get an idea, our family income is about this, and at this particular school we can expect to pay about this amount. So it's a good way to get started to find out, what might I be able to pay? The other thing that's really helpful about this site when you're looking at costs is that it provides a link to the college's net price calculator. Every college is required to have a net price calculator. What that allows you to do is to plug in your own family's information, your adjusted gross income, the taxes you pay. You can put in a student's grades often, their academic performance, maybe test scores. What comes out at the end is an estimated net price at that particular school for your family. Now, it is only an estimate. It's not a final offer of financial aid, but it can give you a much better sense at that school of what you might be expected to pay. You can do this in the future. You can do it today. So you can get a sense of what is it today. You know your family income is going to change, or if it does change, you can use the calculator again and get a better idea. Another source for information like this is another site, also a government-run site, which is called College Navigator. That site can give you all the information that College Scorecard gives you with a lot more detail. So if you really want to dive into the nitty-gritty, go to College Navigator, but College Scorecard is a really good source for getting net price and a link to the school's net price calculator. Key thing to know when you're looking at paying for college is that colleges expect the family to pay for college. That is how they assume college will be paid for. Family pays for college, and then financial aid helps you to cover the costs. For some families, that financial aid might cover a lot. For some families, it might cover a little. But financial aid is there to help you, and the college is assuming you're going to pay for it, and if you want help, you apply for financial aid. Now, when we say family in this situation, it always includes the student. So students are not independent when they're 18 when they're looking at paying for college. Because again, the college is looking at the family unit as paying for college. If a student lives with both parents and there are other siblings involved, the parents have other children, that's the family. If a student lives with only one parent, then for purposes of financial aid, they may only have to report the income from one parent, depending on the school. The family, however, if a parent's remarried and there's a step-parent involved, that parent's income is also included. So the family can mean a variety of things when it comes to financial aid, and you can figure that out when you actually go to fill out the forms. But know that it is the family overall who's expected to pay for college. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the types of financial aid that are out there. The first type of financial aid that you want to be looking at is grants. Grants are money that is mostly based on financial need, and it is given to students and they do not have to pay it back. So this is the great kind of financial aid that you want to get. Based on financial need, if you have need, you can get a grant typically, and it gets sent directly to the school. You don't have to pay it back. The second best type of financial aid is scholarships. Very similar to grants because it's money that you don't have to pay back. However, with grants, typically if you apply for a grant and you or your family is eligible, you can get the grant as long as there are funds available. With scholarships, it's a little bit different because you are competing against other people who also are applying for that scholarship. Now, scholarships may be based on a whole bunch of criteria. It could be financial need, could be academic performance or test scores, could be things like artistic ability, athletics. But for some scholarships, it also might be that you have to attend in a particular state or be from a particular area, particular town, county, state. Some scholarships are awarded directly by the college if you're applying there, and some are awarded from outside sources. Work study is another type of financial aid that many students are eligible for. It is based on financial need, so not every student is eligible for this, but it's certainly a pretty broad range. Work study is where a student works an hourly job, often on campus. They get paid a paycheck, and they use that for the most part, to pay for things like personal expenses and ongoing expenses throughout the school year. They can use it to pay for things like tuition, but it is earned throughout the school year. And then, of course, the final one is loans. So most people think about borrowing money to pay for college. There are loans that are designed for students going to school. Could be in the student's name, could be in a parent's name, could be in someone else's name. But note that there are loans that are specifically designed in terms of when a student's starting, how much they need to come up with so that it benefits the student and the family more than some other types of loans might. All right, so how do you get some of this financial aid? There's several applications you'll need to fill out if you are looking to apply for financial aid. The first one you may have heard of is the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is a federal application. It is the starting point for applying for any types of financial aid. If you think you want any financial assistance for paying for college, you should fill out the FAFSA. If you think you're not going to be eligible for anything but loans, you should still fill out the FAFSA because it's the application for any types of federal aid, including federal loans. So start with the FAFSA. The second application you'll want to fill out is the Vermont Grant application. All Vermont residents can fill out the grant application. It is based, again, on financial need. So if you're a Vermont resident, it's worth applying for the Vermont grant to see if you're eligible for any state grant funds. Because it's based on financial need, not everyone will be eligible. Some students will be eligible for more than others. One thing to note is that the state grant can be taken outside of Vermont. So you do not have to attend a Vermont institution if you're awarded a Vermont grant to get those funds. You could attend out of state, even in Canada. One other form that you may have to fill out is the college financial aid form. Some colleges have their own financial aid form, and if they do, you want to make sure that you fill that out. So that's part of the research you're going to want to do when it comes to paying for college, is finding out what applications do you need to fill out. If the college has their own form, make sure that you do that. Another form that's college specific is the CSS profile. This is a form that several colleges use. Now, the reason that they use the CSS profile is because they typically are going to have funding that they want to distribute of their own. So the FAFSA does not provide enough information for them, and so they say, fill out the CSS profile to give us more information. So while the FAFSA does ask lots of questions, the CSS profile is going to ask a lot more questions. One thing to note about the profile is that there's a fee for this. It is the only exception to financial aid where you might have to pay a fee to apply for financial aid. If you're eligible based on your income, you can get a fee waiver and you don't have to pay that. But note that many families do have to pay that. If the college requires a CSS profile and often their own financial aid form, it typically means they do have their own funds to give out, and so you do want to fill out that form so that you can be eligible for those funds. The next set of applications are scholarship applications. These are the most varied because each scholarship typically has its own application. Sometimes those are simple, sometimes those are more complicated, sometimes they have very early deadlines, sometimes they have late deadlines. One thing to note about scholarships is that yes, there are lots and lots of scholarships out there. The majority of scholarships, students not going to be eligible for. The key is to search for scholarships, find the ones that any given student will be eligible for, and to apply for those. So note that because scholarships have such narrow criteria sometimes, you're just simply not going to be eligible to apply. So you want to find the ones you can apply for and apply for those. Find the applications, fill them out, submit them on time. And then finally, if you look to get loans to help pay for college, there are loan applications that you'll need to fill out for those as well. All right. So in order to get started on applying for financial aid, the first thing you're going to want to do is get a federal student aid account. In order to complete the FAFSA, the student needs to have this account, sometimes known as the FSA ID, and one parent needs to have this. So if a student lives with both parents, then one of those parents needs to get this FSA ID and use that to fill out, complete, and sign the FAFSA, as well as the student. Now, this can take a little bit of time. Essentially, the FSA ID is asking all kinds of questions about you because they want to make sure that you are who you say you are, so that when you fill out the FAFSA, you're saying this information is accurate and yes, it really is me signing this form. So again, the student needs one, the parent needs one. It can take a little bit of time to get the FSA ID, so you want to make sure that you do it ahead of time, give yourself enough time to do that. A key thing to note is that you will need to apply for financial aid every year. So you'll need to complete the FAFSA not just when you first go off to college or to other type of education, but every year that you are looking to get financial aid. So for students, if you have a school email address, we recommend that you don't use that one because you want to have access to it down the road. So use an email address that you will be able to access not just right now, but next year and for years after that. This is something also that you can do right now. So if you're eager to get started, the FSA ID is something that you can get for a student and for a parent before you can fill out other forms. All right. So the next thing to think about is the FAFSA. So you've gotten your FSA ID and you're looking to fill out the FAFSA. How do you do that? First of all, note that it's required. As I said, you need to fill out the FAFSA if you're looking to get any types of financial aid. This form is available on the 1st of October. So if you will be a senior in the 2020 to 2021 academic year, then you can fill it out starting on October 1st of that year. Key thing is to make sure you fill out the right form. So if you're a senior in next academic year, 2020 to 2021, you want to fill out the FAFSA for the 2021 to 2022 academic year. So the key thing to remember is fill it out for the year you will be attending college or other types of education. Make sure you check deadlines for the FAFSA and other types of financial aid applications. While you can start filling it out on the 1st of October, every college is going to set their own deadline for when you need to have it completed. So for some schools that might be early, some schools it might be later. The key thing is if you're applying to multiple schools, find out what is the earliest deadline that they want you to fill out the FAFSA and just meet that deadline. One thing to know is that you can change the FAFSA to some degree. So if you feel like you've made a mistake, you put in the wrong address, you didn't list all your schools, you can go back and change that. If you fill it out really early and then you realize there's a school you want to add because you didn't know you wanted to apply at first, you can go in and add that. You can also take away schools. So know that you don't have to know everything about where you're planning to apply when you fill out the FAFSA because you can add those schools that you might add to your list for application later on as well. Also note that there is a mobile version of the FAFSA, and you don't have to fill it out all at one time. So a student might go in and start the application and use their phone and get going on that. A parent can pick it up later on their own phone or on a desktop and complete the application. So you don't have to do the FAFSA all at once. You can start it, pick up where you left off, and complete it later. The key thing is just to make sure you get all the way through it and actually submit it. All right, the next form to fill out is the Vermont grant application. So the Vermont grant application is available on the VSAC website. Again, it's available to all residents of Vermont. You can also fill this out starting on October 1st. So the same date that you can start the FAFSA is the same date that you can begin to fill out the Vermont grant application. Make sure again that you use the right version of this application because there's often multiple versions for the current school year and for the next school year when you go to fill it out. Just make sure that you're filling out the one for the school year you will be attending. If you want to get a Vermont grant, it's required that you fill out this form. That may go without saying, but it's not a given that everyone who's a Vermont resident will actually get this grant. If you want those funds, you must complete the application. Also note that funds at some point do run out. They don't run out right away, but they will at some point run out. So it's important that you apply as early as you can to make sure that you're in the pool. If there's anything that you need to change, you often can do that. So it's better to apply early to make sure that you're in the pool to be eligible for those funds. Make sure you fill it out, you check the status of it, and then complete any additional information that's requested. Sometimes what happens is VSAC, who administers this grant, will say, we've got your information, but we actually need a little bit more information because something's not clear, or we just always require this of certain families. If that happens, there's a form you can fill out online, or you may need to upload something. You can do it right in your account. One thing to know is that in order to fill out the Vermont grant, the student needs to have a MyVSEC account. This is an account you create through the VSEC website. Now, this form you want to think of as a student application. There is parent information required. There's some financial questions on there that parents will need to include, but it is a student application. So the student should create the MyVSEC account, and the student should be the one who's filling out that application, or at least it should be filled out in the student's name. So a student can get a MyVSEC account and fill out the application from there. Again, note that you can take this grant with you, so you don't have to use it at Vermont school, but you can use it at schools outside of Vermont as well. All right, one term you may hear is EFC. EFC stands for Expected Family Contribution. When you fill out the FAFSA, the very last page that verifies that you've completed the form will give you a number that's called the EFC. Now, what does that mean? This number is a starting point for determining whether a family is eligible for financial aid. So while it is called the expected family contribution, it's not necessarily what you actually have to come up with. It's based on several factors. One is your income. So it's family income again. So it's family, the student, parent, potentially a step parent, whatever the family unit is, that income from the family. Assets are also included. Now this could be investments or real estate, but two key things that are not included on the FAFSA are the home that you live in and any retirement accounts. Now, some colleges may ask for those things. They may use that to determine their own aid, but in terms of federal aid, the home you live in and retirement accounts are not part of that. So don't be surprised if you fill out the FAFSA and you say, I have a retirement account. It did ask me about that. That's okay, because they're not going to ask you about that. Your family size is a factor, and the number of family members in college is also a factor to determine your eligibility. And then the age of the older parent is also a factor, because there's a built-in part of the calculation that says, well, if a parent's closer to retirement, there are other things to think about other than paying for college. So we're going to look at an example of one student who's applying to multiple schools that all cost different amounts. So one school costs $25,000, one's $35,000, and one's $60,000. Student fills out financial aid forms. What does that look like? So the first thing that is going to come into play is the EFC. So that expected family contribution as determined by the FAFSA or other financial aid forms. You're going to assume you got to come up with that. Next thing to think about is the Vermont grant. Now you can see on this chart that the Vermont grant varies based on the school. One of the factors is the cost of the school. So the cost of the school is used in part to determine eligibility for a grant. So you can see that the more expensive school, the student is eligible for a little bit more of a Vermont grant. The next thing that's on there is federal loans. So most students are eligible for some type of federal education loan. There is a cap on how much that is. Currently, for first-year students, it's $5,500. Most students will be awarded that loan. They don't have to take it, but they'll be awarded that. It'll be included in the financial aid package. So you can see on this bar graph here that that amount's the same at every school, because the schools are giving the student the maximum amount. Then comes college aid. So college aid is based on what the school has to offer. It's based on what you might be eligible for given the information that you've given to that college. Now, this could be, again, based on financial aid. It could be based on academic performance or test scores. This aid, while often it can be gift aid, such as a scholarship, sometimes schools will offer their own loans. So just when you're looking at this, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what is that gift aid, or what is that aid from the school? Is it gift aid, or is it in the form of a loan? And then finally, there's what else you need to come up with. So the key thing to know is that most schools are not going to cover all of your costs. You might get a scholarship from the school and an outside scholarship, and you might get a state grant and so on. For most families, it does not cover the full costs. So when we say that financial aid is there to help you, That's just it. It's not going to cover everything. Financial aid helps to pay the cost. So typically what you have to come up with is your expected family contribution, the EFC, plus whatever's left over. Now in this example, you can see that the amount that's left over is the same or very similar for the least expensive school and the most expensive school. That's why it's important to look at your net price. Because if you just look at that advertised price, you might think that that $60,000 school is the least affordable, when in reality, because the college has some funds to give to that particular student, the cost is very similar to the lower priced school. All right, so how do you actually maximize the amount of financial aid that you might be eligible for? One of the things you can do is to do well in school. Academics play a big role in financial aid, whether it's a scholarship that the college might offer to a student because they've done well in school, or it's an outside scholarship where one of the factors is academic performance, or sometimes it just means that if you do better in school, you might be more able to get into a school that has more money. So doing well in school can make a big difference. Another thing you can do is take challenging classes. So if you work hard in school, that's great. If you take harder classes, often colleges want to see that. So again, a school might give you credit for that in terms of admissions. They also might give you credit for that in terms of giving you some money that can help you pay for school. Another thing you can do is to just do more. Sometimes scholarships, for example, are based on community service. So you do community service, you might be eligible for a scholarship. If you have a job, you might be eligible for a scholarship. So the more that you do in your community and at school, the more eligibility you might have. Now, it doesn't mean you should try everything out there, but if you're involved in something, it's going to give you the option, in some cases, to apply for more financial aid. One other thing to know is that if you have certain circumstances pertaining to your family's finances, you should let the financial aid office at each college know that. And you can also tell VSAC for the purposes of the Vermont grant. For example, if your family income has dramatically changed over the past year, that's something you might want to explain. Because the FAFSA uses information from the last tax year that you've completed, sometimes that information is a little bit outdated. So while that can be helpful for some families, and it's certainly helpful to fill out financial aid forms because you already have that information completed, sometimes it just is not accurate for your current situation. If that's the case, you want to let the school know and let VSAC know, and sometimes adjustments can be made based on your current circumstances. And then finally, what you want to do is find scholarships and actually apply for them. One of the main reasons that students don't get scholarships is that they simply don't apply. It can take work to apply for scholarships. It can take work simply to find them. As I said, there are a lot of scholarships out there, and it can be discouraging to find out that, well, most of those scholarships, students just not going to be eligible to apply for. But if you do your research, find those scholarships, and then put in the time to apply, for a lot of students, it really does pay off. But you have to put in the effort if you want to get the scholarship. There are also ways you can consider reducing the costs of college to start with. So one of the things you can do is just to expand where you're looking at schools. For some folks, they think, oh, if I stay within Vermont, then I'm going to save money because I'll be able to go to school that costs less. That may be the case. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are schools that are out of Vermont that say, we want to increase the number of people who come from far away, and they might be willing to offer scholarships for those students. You also might want to consider looking in Canada. Sometimes schools in Canada can be more affordable for families. And of course, sometimes staying in state can really save you some money. So it's worth looking broadly to see what your options are because the costs, again, are just going to vary quite a bit. And so you just want to see what you can find that's out there that will be the most affordable for you and your family. Another thing to think about is dual enrollment in early college. Dual enrollment allows juniors and seniors to take 2 college classes for free while they're still in high school. So there's no cost for tuition to take those courses, and they can be in a whole variety of subjects. So that can save money because if you already have some credits that you can then transfer, it's 2 fewer classes that you have to take. Early college is an option for students in their senior year of high school, and that allows students to take all college classes instead of classes at their high school. So in a perfect world, what happens is the student takes a full year of college and they now have a full year of college done, and they only have to then pay for 3 years of college after that. Early college is tuition free for those students, so while there are some costs associated with that, students may have to pay for books, for example, they do not have to pay tuition, and that can really save a lot of money as students move forward. Advanced placement, or AP, is another way that you may be able to save some money, because if you take the AP exam and score high enough, some schools will give you college credit for that. So again, like taking a college class through dual enrollment, you can get credit before you even start, and it's 1, 2, 3, however many classes that you don't have to take. You do have to take the exam for that, and you do have to score well enough for that particular school, but again, it can save you some classes and potentially some money when you do that. The New England Board of Higher Education offers a program where if there is not a program offered at a public school in your own state, but it is offered at a public school in another state in New England, they will give you a tuition break for that. For example, marine biology, not a popular major in Vermont because we're not on the ocean, but it is a major that's offered at public universities and colleges in other states in New England. So if you are accepted to and decide to attend a different university with that major, you can get a tuition discount and potentially save some money. So if you look up the New England Board of Higher Education's tuition plan online, you can find a list of schools that offer those discounts and what majors you have to be in to get that discount. One other option is to start at a school that costs less and then to transfer. So if you start at a school that's more affordable for your family and then decide you want to transfer to another school, that's certainly an option. When you graduate, the degree you get is from the school from which you graduate. So if you start somewhere else, that's not going to be what your degree shows. So if you potentially want to go to a school that's more expensive for your family, you could start at another school that costs less and then transfer into that school, and that's a way that you potentially could save some money. Another way to go is, if this works for you, is to live at home or to live locally and commute. That way you don't have to pay the fees for room and board, and while you still might have living expenses, it's possible that those might be reduced. So again, not for every student, but if it's an option for you, then it's a way that you potentially can save money by commuting. And then finally, considering service is a way to go, because whether it's the military or something like AmeriCorps, there are programs where if you serve, then you can get money to help you pay for college, either right away or down the road in the form of loan repayment. So service is another thing to think about to reduce the cost of college. So when we're looking at how you actually pay for college, one way to think of it is just there are 3 buckets. One is past income. So this is really just the savings that you've got. So you've saved money, whether it's in a savings account or some other form of account, or money in a glass jar, or you have a college savings account. Anything that you've got saved obviously can help with the cost of college, and it means that you don't have to come up with funds from your current income or from loans. If you look at your current income, obviously that's anything that you're earning over the course of the year. So that's parents and students alike. One option that most schools will offer is a payment plan. And a payment plan allows you to make a plan to make regular payments over the course of the school year to cover the balance of your tuition and other costs. So you can pay for some of the costs of paying for college just by paying the school every month through your current earnings. Scholarships are another piece of your what you could consider your current income, because it's something you're applying for right now and you're getting that income right now. And then finally, there are tax credits that you can get either from paying tuition or for paying interest on student loans. So some of those costs you're paying can be covered through tax credits. And then finally, when you're looking at future income, really that's loans. So you're paying for school now, you're paying it back through future income. Now, that could be in the form of loans that are directly to students. It could be loans that are for parents. And again, those could be loans that are specific for paying for education, but they might be other types of loans that families have access to. So another way to be thinking about this is the more you save, the less you have to borrow. That can be really helpful because anything you have to borrow is just going to cost you more. So even if it is a small amount that you're saving today, you're going to be saving in interest on loans down the road. So whatever you add now is just going to save you money. One way to think about it is how much can students earn over the summer. So it's not just a matter of thinking about what savings do you have right now, but especially if a student is, say, a junior in high school or earlier, it's helpful to think about, well, what can we be saving even over the next couple of years? So if you haven't been saving since a student was 3 years old, that's okay. Anything you save today is going to help. Now, loans are something that many families are looking at to pay for college. So let's look a little bit at what your options are for those. As I mentioned, federal student loans are available to almost all students. That amount is capped out. So this chart shows you what a student can borrow each year and then the cumulative amount that they will have borrowed if they borrow every year. So it starts at $5,500, goes up $1,000 the next year, $1,000 the next year, and then it stays the same for the fourth year of college. And if you add it all up, you get $27,000. That is a reasonable amount for many students to pay back. And because they're federal loans, there are lots of options for paying that back. But just so you know, that is the amount that a student will borrow if they borrow the maximum amount in federal loans that most students can borrow. There are other options for students to borrow as well, though. So there are, again, the federal options. There are also non-federal options. VSAC has a loan that students can borrow, and you look at this chart, you can see that what the interest rates are. Key thing to note is that July 1st of every year brings changes to interest rates. So federal loans change their interest rates every year on July 1st. So while you can find out what the current interest rate is, you won't know what the interest rate is on any federal loans until July 1st of the year before the student will be attending. For VSAC, we change the interest rate at the same time. Again, those interest rates vary, and most lenders do the same thing. So while VSAC does have a loan, you may have other borrowing options that make sense in the student's name. So it's worth shopping around to find out what student loan options are available for that student, what that student needs to do to get it. Is there a cosigner? What does that look like? What are repayment options? All those pieces, and find the best option for you and your family. For parents, there are a couple of different options as well. There is a federal option called the PLUS loan. So parents can borrow this loan to help pay for up to whatever you need to pay the remaining balance on students' education year to year. So this is a great option for many parents. There are a lot of benefits to it because it has the protections of being a federal loan. However, it might be more expensive than some other types of loans. Again, VSAC has a parent loan, and you can see the interest rates on this chart. Again, those will change likely by the time you're looking at actually attending school and needing to borrow. And there potentially are other types of borrowing options. So some parents can borrow a home equity loan or borrow against something else in their life. And if that's the best option for you, then certainly that's the way to go. So it's worth looking at what are all your borrowing options, what makes the most sense for you and your family. Now, to help you as you're looking at borrowing and the cost of college overall, there's several calculators online. One of them is Mapping Your Future. They have a great student loan debt calculator, and they also have a salary wizard. So you can get an estimate of, if I were to go into this career field, what might my salary be, and how does that match up with the student loan debt that I've got. There are also other loans that can help you figure out how much will a loan cost, what is the interest that you would pay, what can you expect your payments to be, that kind of thing. So Student Loan Hero is another good source, and College Board has some calculators as well. Now these are just a sampling. There are others out there, but it's a good start in terms of trying to get a handle on what might you expect to borrow overall, what might you expect to pay back in terms of loan payments and interest when that time comes as well. So looking ahead, once students are in their junior year, there's several things that students can do when thinking about not just obviously the college search process, but when it comes to paying for college. So the first thing to do is just find colleges. So obviously you're going to find colleges that are a good fit in all kinds of ways, academically, where they are, can you get in, those kinds of things. But you do, again, want to be looking at the cost of college as you're doing that college search. So you don't want to end up with only colleges on your list that you apply to that you feel like, well, maybe you can't afford those. You really want to be looking at the price so that you're applying at least to one school where you feel like you're confident you can get in and you're confident that it's likely you're going to be able to pay for that in some way. So net price calculators are a great way to go. Again, you can find those through College Scorecard. You can also just go to the college website and find it directly on there. But for each school, finding that net price can be really helpful. Have those discussions about paying for college early and during junior year so that you don't have any surprises later. And then finally, you can research scholarships during junior year. So typically you're not going to be able to apply for those scholarships yet, but finding the ones that are out there can be easy if you take your time to find them rather than scrambling to try and find them all at once and potentially missing deadlines. So when you're a senior, obviously that's when you're going to actually be applying for college and applying for financial aid. So one thing to do when it comes to paying for college is make sure you find out what the deadlines are for applying for aid at each school. Make sure you meet the earliest deadline that you've got for filling out the FAFSA and any other forms that you have. You can create the federal aid accounts, the FSA ID, if you haven't done that already, so make sure you do that. Fill out the FAFSA, fill out the state grant application, get a MyVSAC account. You can do all of those things during senior year early and just to get it done. If you wait until you're right up to the deadline, you might find out that there's a piece you just won't be able to submit or information you don't have. So do it early and fill out the applications as soon as you can. So the one other thing to fill out for Vermont residents is VSAC's United Scholarship Application, or the USA. You find that through your MyVSAC account, and that is a way for students to apply to multiple scholarships at the same time. So students typically need to be a Vermont resident to apply for these scholarships, but they can apply for multiple scholarships using one application process, and usually that application is due late winter, early spring. So it's important to note what the deadline is for that application when it comes up, and to fill that out. Again, it's a scholarship application that is somewhat simplified compared to some other applications, and because you could apply for multiple scholarships at once, it's worth doing. And then finally, look at other scholarships and apply for those. There are a few scholarships that have very early deadlines, even in the fall, maybe October, where a student has to fill out a scholarship application and get all the materials in. There are others where it might be late in the spring where the deadline is. So that's why doing that research for scholarships early is helpful, because when it comes time, you want to actually apply and get them in on time. All right, so how do you get more information? You can always get more information on the VSAC website. The Pay-Resources page is a good place to get information about all the things that I've mentioned today, including calculators and so on. So that's a good source to go, and we do update that on a regular basis. If you want something that's a little more organized, comprehensive, something maybe you can print out, you can look for the VSAC Paying for College Guide. We have this available as a PDF on our website, but again, if you want to have something tactile you can hold in your hand, you can print this out, and that's helpful for a lot of people. Another guide that we do print and is also available online is VSAC's Education Loan Guide. So this is information that's all about education loans, and it can help you navigate that process. We do update this again, so if you're seeing this presentation early, just make sure you're getting the most recent version of that Education Loan Guide, as well as the Paying for College Guide, because things do change a little bit every year. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, to get more resources, you can go to vsac.org, and we have links and information all about financial aid and paying for college. And we also have a Facebook page, and you can connect with us there, and you can get regular updates on this and anything else that BSEC does. Thanks so much.